wind off the Laramie plains tasted like salt and ash, and it scraped across Elias Boone's face as if trying to peel the years off him. But nothing could take the weight of 62 winters spent under sun and rifle. He rode low in the saddle, knees stiff with age, spine hunched like a war-worn tree clinging to dry soil. Beside him, Nate Dawson rode easy, reins held loose, his horse moving with the cocky grace of a man who hadn't yet learned how the West grinds everyone down eventually. The trail behind them was long and pale, a streak of white dust curled like smoke against the jagged hills. Sparse brush clawed at the wind, and dead cottonwoods stood like skeletons waving goodbye to another dry season. They'd been riding for 3 days with no sign of the kid Tommy Baxter, barely 19, slippery as a greased pig and bold enough to rob a preacher on horseback. Not kill him, no, but knock him clean off his saddle and leave him in the dirt with a busted nose and a Bible missing its silver clasp. "You sure this leads good?" Nate asked, thumbing sweat from his temple beneath the brim of his hat. Elias didn't answer right away. He tugged gently on his reins and let his mare slow to a walk. The horse gave a soft huff, grateful. Butcher in Cheyenne saw someone matching his description. Said the boy traded a pair of polished boots for a bag of jerky and a jug of vinegar. Nate let out a dry laugh. Hell of a dinner. Elias glanced over. Desperate men don't eat for taste. They eat for moving. Ahead, the town of Cheyenne lay like a smudge on the edge of the prairie. Chimneys coughed smoke into the sky. A rail line cut through the landscape like a fresh scar, silver and humming, the sound faint but sharp. They could see the outlines of false front buildings, a water tower, and the big iron-banded windmill that turned slow as judgment behind the church steeple. Elias rolled his neck and winced. His fingers ached today. The joints swelled in the cold, then stiffened when it warmed. He flexed them one at a time, watching his hand like it belonged to someone else. "You gonna be able to grab him if he runs?" Nate asked. There was no challenge in the tone, just the easy sting of a young man who hadn't yet broken a hip. "Only thing I can still grip fast is a trigger." Nate grinned. "Then maybe I'll chase and you shoot." Elias didn't return the smile, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. They reached Cheyenne as the sun dipped low, setting the town aglow with copper light. The main street was wide and rutted, horses tied to rails outside the saloon, the general store, and a bank with its windows boarded since last fall. A boy no older than Tommy swept dust off the porch of the post office, barely noticing the two riders passing by. They went first to the butcher's. The place smelled of brine and blood, sawdust thick on the floor. A large man with stained sleeves stood behind the counter, cleaver in hand. "We're looking for a boy," Elias said. "Gray suit, too clean for his face." The butcher sniffed. Boots were worth more than the jerky. Looked like they pinched him, though. He walked like his toes were crying. "You see where he went?" He asked if there was work. "I told him to try the saloon, maybe carry wood or mop piss. That was yesterday." Outside, Elias and Nate exchanged looks. Nate nodded toward the saloon. "We watch tonight," Elias said. "He shows. We take him quiet. No fuss." Nate spit into the dust. "Let's just hope he ain't packing." But Elias wasn't worried about the boy pulling a gun. He was worried about what the boy reminded him of. The dusk settled over Cheyenne like burnt molasses, thick and low, casting long shadows that crept between the buildings. The street lanterns flickered to life one by one, their glass bellies glowing orange in the twilight. The saloon's windows spilled light and laughter into the street, but Elias stood across the road, unmoving, leaning against the post like an aging statue carved from cracked wood and resolve. He watched every man who entered, watched every boy too. Nate paced nearby like a caged hound, flipping a coin, letting it clink against his palm with each idle toss. "What if he doesn't come?" "He will," Elias said. "He's got no food, no coin, and pride too big for sleeping in stables." A wagon rumbled past, hauling coal and noise. The horses snorted, their hooves clattering against the dry-packed dirt. Elias's eyes didn't move. Behind him, the butcher's shop had closed, the scent of smoke and iron still hanging in the air. That butcher had known something else, Elias figured, but fear or loyalty kept his mouth shut. Nate stopped pacing. "You ever think maybe we let this one go?" Elias said nothing. The wind tugged at his coat. Somewhere far off, a train whistled low. Then, just past 9, A figure slinked into view. Slim, sharp, nervous, gray suit hanging loose on skinny bones. Hair slicked back like a boy playing dress-up. Tommy Baxter. He stepped through the saloon doors like a stray pup pretending to be a wolf. Nate moved fast, circling the back alley. Elias waited 10 slow breaths, then pushed off from the post. Inside, the saloon smelled of beer, sweat, and regrets. Cards slapped against wood. Boots tapped rhythms against floorboards. Elias walked through it all like a ghost, eyes locked on the boy at the bar. Tommy turned, froze. Their eyes met. Elias took one slow step, and Tommy bolted. But Elias had counted on that. He didn't chase, just turned and walked back outside, slow and steady, because he knew where Nate was waiting. The alley behind the saloon reeked of urine, rot, and coal smoke. Broken crates leaned against cracked brick walls, and puddles of rainwater shimmered in the dim moonlight, though no rain had fallen in days. Nate stood in the shadow of the smokehouse chimney, shotgun cradled loose across his chest. He'd taken the shells out. This wasn't meant to be messy. Tommy Baxter came barreling out the back door like a bullet, shoulders low, feet scattering gravel. He nearly slammed into Nate, skidding to a halt just as the younger man stepped forward, cool and steady. "Evenin'," Nate said, tilting his head. Tommy looked to his left fence too high, to his right wall too tight. He froze. Elias emerged from the saloon's far side like a slow-moving mountain. His coat billowed faintly, catching in the wind like a sail too tired to fill. He said nothing. Tommy's chest rose and fell fast. "You here to kill me?" "No," Elias said. "We're here to listen, if you got something worth saying." Tommy's hands hovered near his sides, not quite raised, not quite lowered. "I didn't shoot nobody." "We know," Nate said. "You just knocked a preacher on his ass and ran off with his boots." "They weren't just boots," Tommy muttered. "They were stitched, real leather, fit like something you didn't earn," Elias finished. Tommy's lip twitched. He stepped back, heel crunching on glass. "I ain't proud of it." "You hungry?" Elias asked. Tommy blinked. "What?" "Hungry. Because you look starved and smell like desperation." Tommy hesitated. Then, with a sigh that sounded more like surrender than fear, he slumped to the dirt and nodded. "I ain't eaten since the jerky." Nate handed over a heel of bread and a flask of water. Tommy took them without speaking. They sat in the dirt alley, the three of them, like old friends waiting out a storm. Elias finally spoke, voice low. "I did worse than you once. Younger, too. Shot a man over a card game. Thought I was owed something by the world." Tommy chewed slowly. "What happened?" "A preacher saw something in me. Turned me in but also gave me a Bible and a job shoveling stables for 3 years." "You believe in God?" Tommy asked. "I believe in paying what you owe." A silence stretched long between them. Nate leaned back, tapping his boot heel on a brick. Tommy swallowed the last of the bread. "I didn't just steal the boots. I got a stash, took more than I needed, planned to ride south, start new." "You still can," Elias said, "but not like this." Tommy looked up sharply. "You ain't taking me in?" "You got 2 choices," Elias said. "1, we bring you to the sheriff. You'll serve time, maybe come out meaner than you went in. Or you return what you took, apologize to that preacher, and tomorrow morning you walk into Hank Merriman's smithy. He's got arthritis bad as me, needs hands that still move quick." Tommy stared between them, suspicion creeping into his eyes. "Why?" Elias met his gaze. "Because I know what it's like to be young, scared, and too dumb to see a way out." Tommy looked at Nate. Nate just shrugged. "Don't ask me. I wanted to shoot you." That drew the ghost of a smile. Tommy nodded slowly. "All right, I'll take the second road." "Good," Elias said. "We'll go with you to the stash. Then you sleep at my campfire. And if you run, you won't." Elias offered his hand. Tommy looked at it, then shook it. The deal was struck beneath a sky full of dust and stars. 3 men sat in the dirt and rewrote the ending of a story that was supposed to end with shackles or gunfire. And for once, the West let someone walk free. Morning in Cheyenne came hard and golden, the kind of morning that smelled like dust, coffee, and iron. The sun crept slowly over the eastern hills, painting long fingers of light across the rooftops and glinting off the rails that split the land like a promise never kept. Elias stood near the campfire, rolling his shoulders, trying to wake up his stiff joints. The night had been cold, and his bones screamed like rusted hinges. Tommy was already awake, sitting cross-legged, his stolen gray suit wrinkled and torn at the cuffs. Beside him, a small burlap sack lay folded shut his stash, the stolen goods. His eyes looked hollow but focused. He hadn't run, not in the night, not at dawn. That counted for something. "You sure about this?" Nate asked from the saddle, sipping coffee from a tin cup. Elias nodded. "Yeah, let's see if the boy keeps his word." They rode together through the waking town, past the blacksmith shop where the hiss of coal and clang of metal had not yet begun. A dog barked behind a fence. A woman emptied a chamber pot into the street. Somewhere, a piano played a sour note in an upstairs room. Their first stop was the preacher's house. The Reverend, an older man with a thick beard and sad eyes, answered the door in shirt sleeves. He stared at Tommy like a ghost had come knocking. "I brought back what I took," Tommy said, holding out the sack. The preacher opened it slowly. Inside were the silver-clasped Bible, a pocket watch, and a few other small things. Elias recognized the look on the preacher's face. Not shock, not anger, relief. "I didn't expect," the preacher began. "You shouldn't have to," Elias said. The preacher took the sack. "Thank you." Tommy nodded. He didn't look proud, just cute. They left without ceremony. The next stop was Hank Merriman's blacksmith shop, a low building of red brick and soot-streaked windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, the clang of iron on iron began to echo as Hank struck his first piece of the day. He was a big man, belly hanging over his apron, arms like oak limbs. When they entered, he looked up from his anvil with a scowl. "If you're here about that damn horseshoe job, I told Clara I'd get to it." "This boy's looking for work," Elias interrupted. Hank looked Tommy over. "That's so?" Tommy nodded. "I got fast hands. I can sweep, lift, run errands." "You ever held a hammer?" "Not like yours." Hank eyed Elias. "This a favor?" "It's a bet," Elias said. "I bet you'll be glad you said yes." Hank grunted. "Don't make me regret it." Tommy stepped forward. "I won't." Elias and Nate stepped out into the street. The clang of metal behind them was rhythmic, like a heartbeat finding its pace. "Well, I'll be damned," Nate muttered. "You just might," Elias replied, cracking a rare smile. They mounted their horses and turned toward the edge of town. Behind them, Cheyenne came alive. A man hammering nails into a storefront sign, a milk cart rattling over loose stones, two boys racing barefoot through the mud. Tommy didn't call out to them. He didn't wave. He just picked up a broom and started sweeping coal dust into a pile. That afternoon, the wind picked up. Elias and Nate rode into it, hats pulled low, dust curling up around their horses' hooves. "You think he'll stay?" Nate asked. "No one stays forever," Elias said, "but he might stay long enough to matter." They rode in silence for a time. The land opened up ahead, empty plains, wide sky, nothing but questions on the horizon. Behind them, a boy began shaping iron not with theft or speed, but sweat and rhythm. And for the first time in a long while, Elias Boone felt like maybe the West hadn't forgotten how to forgive. The third morning in Cheyenne rose with a sky washed in steel blue and silence. The storm that had threatened on the horizon for 2 days finally rolled in during the night, soft at first, then loud and relentless. By sunrise, the streets were rivers of mud, and the iron roofs clattered under rain like wagon wheels on rock. Elias Boone sat under the overhang of a feed store, hunched into his coat. His joints felt like they'd been hammered by the heavens. He held his battered hat in one hand, watching the storm ease into drizzle. Across the street, the blacksmith's forge was already roaring. Orange fire spilled out onto the wet street like the sun leaking through a crack in the world. Tommy Baxter was still there, still sweeping, still lifting, still showing up. From under the shelter of the old porch, Elias watched the boy wrestle a steel rod from the furnace. He moved like someone unsure of his own strength, like someone learning to live inside a different body. His hands weren't quick like a thief anymore. They were deliberate, heavy, and careful. Behind him, Hank Merriman barked out orders. Keep your shoulders square. The metal don't care if your back hurts. Hit like you mean it. Elias smiled. The old blacksmith was a hard man, but fair. The kind of man who expected more from people because he'd seen what happened when you didn't. Nate appeared beside him, dragging a stool through the mud and sitting with a grunt. You've been watching him all morning. Better than playing poker with men who don't bluff, Elias muttered. Nate laughed. You're getting sentimental. Elias didn't respond. He just leaned back, watching the hammer rise and fall inside the smithy like a slow, steady heartbeat. They'd planned to leave that morning, to ride north and chase a new bounty out by Fort Bridger. But Elias had hesitated, an old instinct telling him something wasn't finished. It came just after noon. A commotion at the far end of Main Street. Two riders galloping in hard and dirty. One wore a red kerchief. The other had a repeating rifle strapped across his back. They pulled up in front of the bank, spooked the horses tied out front, and dismounted fast. Elias stood. Nate was already up beside him. They look familiar? Too familiar, Elias said. The men stormed into the bank, guns drawn. The street froze. Elias crossed it like he'd done it 1,000 times, boots splashing in puddles, coat flapping, revolver drawn but low. Nate followed close, hand resting on the butt of his pistol. Inside the smithy, Hank bellowed a curse, yanking Tommy back from the door. Stay inside, he barked. You ain't ready for what's out there. But Tommy stepped forward. Across the street, Elias kicked open the bank's swinging doors. Inside, one of the men was already shouting at the clerk, a sawed-off shotgun leveled at the teller's chest. The other was dragging a young woman by the collar, using her like a human shield. Elias raised his voice. Boys, that's enough. The man with the woman turned. His eyes were wild. Who the hell? Before he finished, a hammer rang out behind him. Tommy Baxter had crossed the street, rain on his shoulders, soot still on his cheeks, holding a length of raw iron glowing red from the forge. I said drop it, he growled. The moment froze. Eben Elias flinched. The robber twitched, then moved. Not to shoot, but to shove the woman. Elias fired. The man collapsed. Nate tackled the second one, knocking him into a pile of coins and ledgers, the air filled with smoke and shouts. When it cleared, the robbers were bound, the woman safe, and the whole town standing outside in the drizzle, stunned. Tommy looked down at the iron in his hands. It had cooled, blackened, useless now. Hank limped forward and clapped him on the back. You swing better than you sweep. Tommy said nothing, just nodded once. Elias holstered his gun and stepped up beside the boy. You didn't have to do that. Tommy looked at him, voice flat but steady. Yes, I did. The storm broke sometime in the night. By dawn, Cheyenne lay washed clean, its muddy streets now hardened into cracked earth beneath a pale morning sun. Smoke drifted gently from chimneys, the scent of pinewood fires settling over the town like a warm quilt. Elias Boone stood beside his horse, adjusting the worn leather strap on his saddle, eyes scanning the sky as if looking for something he'd forgotten. Nate Dawson stood nearby, one hand shielding his eyes, the other dangling a canteen. Clear day for riding, he said. Elias didn't answer right away. He ran his fingers along the horse's mane, then glanced toward the blacksmith shop. Inside, sparks flew like fireflies. The rhythmic clang of hammer on iron echoed across the quiet street. Tommy was already working, arms moving with confidence, sweat on his brow though the sun hadn't risen fully. His gray suit was gone, replaced with a thick leather apron and soot-stained sleeves. He looked like he belonged there now. Nate followed Elias's gaze. You still thinking about dragging him to Fort Bridger with us? Elias shook his head. That boy's already made his choice, and it's better than anything we'd give him. They watched as Hank barked something across the forge and Tommy answered with a grunt and a harder swing of the hammer. A moment later, Tommy turned, caught sight of the two men at the edge of town, and walked toward them, wiping his hands on a rag. You leaving? He asked. Elias nodded. Time. Tommy looked down at the dirt. Thanks. For all of it. You did the heavy lifting, Elias replied. Tommy smiled faintly. Hank says I'm strong enough now to handle the big iron, shoeing teams, wagon axles, might even forge my own tools soon. Nate raised an eyebrow. You planning to stay put? For now, Tommy said. Town needs fixing more than I need running. Elias reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in oilcloth. He handed it to Tommy. The boy unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a 6-shooter, old but clean, Elias's spare, the one he hadn't fired in years. I'm not, Tommy began. Elias stopped him. You won't need it, but keep it close, just in case the world forgets who you're trying to be. Tommy nodded, eyes glinting with something between pride and burden. Nate stepped forward, offering a hand. You ever get tired of hammering horseshoes? Come find us. There's always trouble worth riding toward. Tommy shook it. I'll remember that. The sun rose higher. Elias swung into his saddle with a grunt, bones creaking. Nate did the same. The town was waking behind them, doors opening, children laughing somewhere near the church, someone hammering a new sign into the general store. As they rode out, Elias looked back once. Tommy was still standing there, the revolver in one hand, the rag in the other, sun on his shoulders. He didn't wave, didn't need to. He turned and walked back into the forge. The hammer rang again. The sound faded as the two riders moved west, hooves thudding against dry earth. The prairie stretched before them, wide and waiting. After a long silence, Nate said, "Feels strange, leaving something behind and knowing it won't fall apart." Elias smiled under his breath. Maybe we didn't leave it. Maybe we just helped build it. Ahead of them, the sky widened into endless blue. Behind them, in a quiet town in Wyoming, redemption burned brighter than iron.